The Saginaw River helped shape our community. It provided a water source and support for ecosystems and created transportation routes from the Saginaw Bay into the valley. People came together to trade at sites near the river, and eventually cities like Saginaw City and East Saginaw were established by people who had big dreams for Saginaw. People found the marshy land near the river difficult. The land wasn't easy to farm like it was downstate, and the mosquitoes spread illness. But the 20 miles of the Saginaw River did have branches of many other rivers called tributaries flowing into it, and those rivers, 864 miles worth, joined up to the Saginaw River to flow out to the Saginaw Bay, making Saginaw an ideal place for transporting resources to the Great Lakes and beyond. In the 1800s, the main resource Michigan offered the world was lumber in the form of tree logs. After the Civil War, many people flocked to Saginaw because of the growing number of jobs in the lumber industry. By this time, the trees in the eastern United States had been cut down, and lumber companies looked for other forests of white pine trees. And Michigan became the next source of trees to harvest for lumber, for buildings, and more. As sawmills dotted the banks of the river changed too. The bayous, which had proved useful for storing logs before they were cut into planks, soon couldn't hold all the logs that were floated down from the log camps, and Saginaw boom companies cut into the banks to create new man-made bayous. They built docks and wharves, which also changed the banks of the river. The Saginaws continued to grow, and at one point there were more than 100 sawmills along the banks of the Saginaw River. First a plank road, and then railroads connected East Saginaw to cities downstate. East Saginaw became the wealthiest of the two Saginaws because they had the advantage of the river to transport lumber and materials. Mills could be huge operations with their own repair and supply shops, wharves, drying yards, salt works, and even boarding houses for the workers. The peak year for lumber was 1882, when over 1 billion board feet of lumber planks were cut. In the lumber industry, everyone had their own special job. Lumberjacks worked in the lumber camps in the woods, and the fellers and sawyers cut down the trees and prepped them for transport. Loaders and teamsters moved the logs to the riverbanks over frozen winter ground. Camps had blacksmiths to repair tools and cooks to keep everyone fed. In the spring, the logs were floated down the rivers to the sawmills, and the rivermen used their peavies to move the logs in an orderly fashion. To track which logs belonged to which boom company, a log mark was hammered into each saw log's end. At the sawmills, the mill workers cut logs into planks and bundled them to be shipped out for sale all around the United States. Others turned the scrap into shingles for houses and bundled them for sale. During the lumbering era, Saginaw lumber workers cut over 22 billion board feet of lumber. That's enough to build 5 sidewalks 4 feet wide from the Earth to the moon. After all the trees were cut down in Michigan, the lumber companies moved their logging operations westward. That left many people in the Saginaw Valley without work or prospects, but Saginaw was ready to reinvent itself.
This program was made possible by a grant from CTN, the Community Telecommunications Network.